Hello, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, I'm Dia, and on this channel I share tips and ideas on home design, decorating and DIYs. So if this is something you enjoy watching and you haven't already subscribed, hit that subscribe button. It helps my channel and encourages me to continue creating videos for you. I'm always trying to create stylishly decorated spaces with character. This often includes unique wall art, but not everybody has the budget for custom artwork. So I often create my own wall decor. In today's video, I will show you how I transform two thrifted items and some other DIY wall decor ideas and styling tips. So let's get started on the first DIY artwork piece. This was a very colorful printed canvas that I got at the thrift store for around $4. Although it's quite pretty, it doesn't go with the color palette of the space I'm working with. First, let's turn this into a blank canvas by rolling on a coat of primer. I'm using the canvas as a base to create a piece of art that can be hung both vertically and horizontally. I want to play with texture, movement, shadows, and highlights for a versatile, elegant piece. If you're wondering, these are tops from empty protein powder containers that I use to lift the canvas off the drop cloth to make painting the sides easier. Next, let's add a coat of white paint. I use a sample pod of Sherwin-Williams Origami White. This is a nice, warm, creamy white and is a perfect base for this piece. Sample paint often comes in a satin sheen, but adding a bit of baking soda makes it look matte and helps it dry faster. Although I have a rough idea of what I want this to look like, I like to go through the process with an open mind and see what I come up with. I wanted to challenge myself to use things I already had at home, keeping it simple and budget-friendly. So I'm using leftover paint samples in white and a darker color. To start, I create a 3-inch border by measuring around the canvas and taping it out. To get a crisp line between the middle and the border, I use the same white paint to apply a thin layer at the edge of the tape. This will hopefully prevent the middle color from seeping under the tape onto the border. If you want to replicate this piece, you can play with different colors to complement your specific color scheme. I decided to mix the white with a medium taupe color called felted wool at a ratio of 50-50, and then added a generous amount of baking soda to create a paste-like consistency that is perfect for creating texture. The mixture thickens and dries quite fast, so it's best to mix a small batch right before you need to use it. Art is very personal and is often left to the artist's and viewer's interpretation. I want to keep this simple, but add interest through texture and color variation. Painter's tape will help me get just the right shape and angle. I think I'll make one side a little bit smaller than the other, so it's not too symmetrical. Now let's pile a thick layer of mixture. This is when I realized that I should have used a wider tape. But hey, I'm using what I have at home, so I'll just double it up. I'm watering down the mixture and use the brush to smooth out any lumps and also to soften the top layer to make it easier to work on the textured technique. I'm using a hair comb to create a striped effect. I'm going for a fluid, organic look, embracing the imperfection in the lines. And of course, if I want to adjust, I simply smooth it out with the paintbrush and then try again. Let me carefully remove the tape while it's still wet and see how it looks. I want to keep the tape on the other section in place, so I'm using a blade to carefully score the tape without damaging the canvas. Well, despite my efforts, it looks like a bit of paint got onto the border. But since it's still wet, it can easily be cleaned up with a damp microfiber cloth. Now let me tackle the other part of this canvas by brushing on a lighter version of the same color. I used the mixture that was left over and I added white paint and a drop of taupe to get a color that was several shades lighter. And of course, a bit of baking soda to mattify the paint. Once I'm done with this, I'll just let it sit there and dry overnight. I'm taping up the lightest section to prepare it for the dry brush paint technique, which I'll be doing in a darker tone. Just a drop of taupe and a bit of white is just the right amount to achieve the right color. I wipe off excess paint onto a paper towel and lightly drag the brush across, going back and forth with minimal pressure. It's all about layering to create visual interest. So while that is drying, let me touch up the border edges. And let's not forget to add a bit of baking soda. Now you know why I have such a huge bag of baking soda. Because I use it all the time. I also rolled on a second coat of white paint on the border using a mini foam roller. But wait, I'm not done yet. I decided that it needed some highlights. So I watered down the white paint and used the same dry brush technique with a clean brush. This time I'm using the tip of the brush to add some light white streaks. Here is a close-up of the texture and dry brushing technique. The combination of texture, shadows, and highlights gives this piece movement and interest. I could have hung this on the wall as is, but I decided to use some spare trim to create a frame. I'm not going to show you how I made the frame because this video would end up being too long, especially since I want to show you how I styled this piece of art and then move on to the next project. This large framed poster with a non-glare glass front was another thrift find. I decided to use this to create a piece that has a naturally organic feel, plus a nostalgic element to it. Since this is a metal frame, I'll have to take it apart and save the pieces to reassemble it later. I'll use the foam board backing as the foundation of my piece. Well, I guess I won't be using the glass. That's okay, I can still create a nice piece without the glass. First, I'll cover the foam board with some fabric. This will be a nice textured base. Since this is linen, let me first iron out some of the creases. Next, I'll cut the fabric to size, leaving about an inch or so around to fold and secure it to the back. I'm using these Krylon spray glue to stick the fabric to the board. It's a great product because it allows you to reposition things and it doesn't smell. I put some paper under the foam board to catch any overspray. I laid the fabric good side down and then placed the sticky side of the board on it. Then flip it over to smooth out the fabric. Next, let me secure the edges to the back of the board with double-sided tape. I cut the corners at an angle to get an even corner fold. Let's trim off the excess and then stick some regular tape around to keep the fabric from fraying. By the way, you can do this with any fabric, especially if you find one that has a unique design and color. It's an easy way to create an interesting piece of framed wall decor that matches your style and color scheme. But for this piece, I have other plans. I'll take this thick watercolor paper and trim it so it's about 2.5 inches smaller than the fabric covered board. I hand tear the edges to get a raw edge finish by pressing down on the ruler while carefully tearing the paper. Next, I'll prepare some tea. No, I'm not planning to take a tea break. I'm going to use this to give the paper an aged look. While I let the tea steep and cool off, let me show you what I'm planning to use as the focal point of this art piece. You see, I have a habit. Call me sentimental, but I like to collect interesting looking leaves from locations we've lived at. I put them between paper towel sheets in thick books and leave them there for a few months so they can be pressed flat and dry out. Then I use them to create simple framed wall decor. These specific leaves are from a row of trees in our neighborhood when we lived in the Mediterranean. I love the delicate form and interesting pattern, and this is a way to hold on to the sentimental memory of walks in that neighborhood with our beloved dog. I play around with them until I like the arrangement, and then I take a photo so I can refer to it later. They are quite fragile, so I carefully put them aside until I'm ready to glue them to the paper. And now let's use that tea to age the perimeter of the paper. I'm using an artist's brush to apply an uneven layer at the edge in sections and then dab it dry with a paper towel. I'm also hand trimming the corners to give it a worn antique look. Is antique a word? Well, it is now. Next, I'll take a natural sea sponge that's been soaked in clean water. I dilute the tea 50-50 with water so the dye mixture is not as dark. I dip the sponge, squeeze out the excess, and lightly dab it around the outer part of the paper. This will create a subtle effect, making the paper look aged. After an hour, the tea-stained sections of the paper will look much darker, so I'm not going to overdo it. Now back to the leaves, which I've rearranged on the paper, referring to the photo on my phone. I'll take each branch, spray it with glue, and then put it back in its position before moving on to the next one. Oops! It seems I have a spray can malfunction. But that's okay. Good thing I have this artist brush handy to even out the glue before placing each branch in its place. Let's wait for a bit for the glue to dry before moving along to the next step of this process. I'm using tacky glue from the craft store and pouring a generous amount to the back of the paper, using a brush to even it out towards the edges. And then I add glue to the middle. Now let's center it onto the fabric-covered board. I'm putting wax paper over the leaves to protect them, followed by a poster board, and then I weigh it down with some books. If the glass of this frame had not broken, I would just put the glass on top and reinstall the frame, and this project would be complete. But since I don't have a glass front to protect the leaves, I'll have to do a couple more things. I use the same tacky glue to carefully brush a light coat on each leaf. This goes on white and dries clear. Finally, I'll spray the paper with UV-resistant matte clear coat for added long-lasting protection. So here is how this looks after I've reassembled the frame. Later on, I may decide to add a glass front, but for the time being, this will do just fine. Now let me show you some other examples of the same concept. Call me sentimental. I have a set of 6 framed leaves from our first home over 29 years ago that have been displayed in every home we've lived in since then. Over the years, they have had different mats and different frames depending on my evolving style, but they have always been a sweet reminder of where we started as a married couple. Then there is this example. If you've been following my channel for a while, you may have noticed these 5 square frames above the TV. The simplicity of a single leaf glued onto plain thick paper and placed in a frame with a dark matting makes it look more substantial. A grouping of 5 such frames hung in a row over the TV fills in the dead space above, balances out the look, and distracts your eye from focusing on that big black box on the wall. This is proof that wall decor doesn't have to be elaborate or expensive to add character to a space. It's all about color combination and how you hang or style them. Let me know in the comments below which of these art pieces or ideas you liked most. I hope I've inspired you to put your crafting hat on to create your own unique artwork. If you enjoyed watching this video, hit that like button and remember to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss upcoming videos on home decorating, design inspiration, and home improvement ideas. Thank you for watching. See you next time. Bye for now.